I don't know, I've kind of forgotten how to start these things off. It's been so long. That's okay. Alright, I'll get it together. Hi everyone, welcome to Deadhouse. We are back and I would love to tell you what month this is, but we're pre-recording, so I have no idea what month you're watching this in. But it's our first one back after the break.
Right. We do appreciate your patience during that time. It did take us that long for me to kind of get onto a bit of a schedule and get through some books.
And then
so we
the
can
holidays happened, and then also we live in a place with not good winter weather. And in fact, we are rushing to beat a storm as we speak.
Yeah, we're getting, 25 to 50 centimeters?
Yeah.
Yeah. Pray for us.
So, on that note, we are doing Series 2001, Bride of the Living Dummy. Now, this is the last official Series 2000 book we're going to do as part of the regular book club. If we do any others, they will be bonus videos. You won't necessarily have to get the book to join in.
Yeah.
Just because we know those books are really hard to get.
Yeah, so you're not finding them secondhand very often.
No, and they are kind of on the pricier side in the secondary market, so.
Yeah. We'll stick with the original.
This was an interesting one. Again, Series 2000, but this was the second book in the series, and it was published February 1998. The Series 2000 series did start in 98 and continued through 99 and up to, I think, the end of 2000. But there you go.
Yeah. It's not my favorite spin-off.
Well, I mean, like all things in the 90s, we were anxious to get to the year 2000 for some reason.
Yeah.
So everything in like 98, 99 was like, new millennium. This book starts us off in a similar kind of premise. At first you think it's going to be two sisters, but it turns out it's three, and there's a twin.
So the twins are Katie and Amanda.
And they're 6.
Yes. Wonderful age.
Yeah, especially when their older sister is only 11, so.
Yeah. So the twins are bothering Jillian. Jillian's the older sister. Especially they like to bother her when she's feeding her lizard, and that's her pride and joy.
Yeah, and this is the thing that weirded me out, because the minute they start mentioning this lizard and how precious it is to her, I started having a panic that they were going to do something bad to the lizard. Because, listen, horror and animals, and the minute you mention an animal, you know it's going to die, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they're not going to kill an animal in a kid's book, but I still got nervous.
Oh, absolutely.
It's one of those, like, gut reaction things.
What are they going to do? Yeah. The twins do have a little friend.
They do. So this is interesting. This is the typical Slappy setup,
Yes.
but with Mary Ellen.
Yes. The female twist.
So Mary Ellen is one of those big 3-foot dolls. And by that I mean like the ones that used to like come up to here on you when you were a kid.
Yeah.
I used to own a giant Barbie one. I don't know if you remember, in a white dress. I think she was a bride. Like Mary Ellen.
I remember seeing them. I don't remember you having it. Or maybe I've seen it at your place and I'm not making that association.
Yeah, that connection. Because I didn't really take it out a lot. Mostly just sat in my room.
Okay.
From day one when I got it, because you're supposed to be able to wear the dress as well. I was too big for the dress, obviously. You only really fit the doll. Yeah, I had one of those, and I'll insert a picture of it if I can find one online here on the screen somewhere so you know what I'm talking about. But there used to be these giant 3-foot Barbies. They were just like these thick, big dolls that were basically child-sized. And this is what Mary Ellen is.
Here comes the bride. My size bride Barbie. My size. Getting Barbie ready. Style her long blonde hair. Barbie brings wedding fun to share. My size bride Barbie. Wear her pretty veil. Sparkling necklace. Here's the bell. I can wear your dress. What a beautiful bride you'll be. My size bride Barbie.
And Barbie dolls of the world with beautiful costumes from their own lands are fun to collect, each sold separately.
She's not a small doll. She's almost the size of the twins.
Right, so it's a bit of a imposing factor that this doll is with the twins all the time. Because it's the size of a person.
Yeah, so it's very imposing, and it's also very much why Jillian gets frustrated with her and almost treats her as if she's a person causing trouble.
Yeah.
And it's actually a very good setup, and a very interesting setup to the metaphor of the relationship between the two younger sisters and the older sister.
Mm-hmm.
Something R.L. Stine has done really well is show different child relationships that way with the use of Slappy in these series. And there was a really big thing, especially in the late 80s, early 90s, about pitting like girl against girl and stuff. Mm-hmm. And like there's always like a mean girl. And
oh, yeah.
I find with this dummy series, he's really avoided falling into that. And because like in the 90s especially, and I mean, it still happens, it's still a trope, there's still a lot of work to do there, but it's less common. And you can see him really get away from that, because in the first book it was sister against sister. Mm-hmm. But in the second book he avoids it because it's not just sister against sister, there's a third younger brother, even though it's mostly about the conflict between the two sisters. The next book, it's her and her brother versus her cousin. Yeah. And, I mean, her cousin's male, so it's not necessarily sister on sister or, like, female on female. Yeah. So he's doing a good job of, like, broadening it. And in this way, he sort of makes it more about the age gap and the fact that they're related than the fact that they're sisters together.
Because that's enough to cause conflict on its own.
Exactly.
Age differences.
And because the twins are so young and because there's two of them, it makes you feel like they're sort of ganging up on the older sister. Mm-hmm. And so that's how he sort of, I guess, avoided that female on female kind of trap, we'll say, of going into that trope. It doesn't feel like it follows that familiar territory.
Mm-hmm. He did a good job.
Yeah.
So Mary Ellen has her own personality, being a 3-foot doll. And that personality is someone that does not like Jillian.
No, apparently she doesn't. So the girls are constantly saying she doesn't like you. Yeah. And there's a lot going on here with that. It's also interesting to note there's no atmosphere given.
No, none at all.
Usually right away there's like an atmosphere with a setting.
Character description, something, but there's nothing yet.
This does a slow build as to what both the girls look like, what Mary Ellen looks like, and what Jillian looks like. Yeah. It's the same slow build of like slowly getting to know your characters and what they look like and who they are that we're going to see more of in the Horrorland series. Okay. That hasn't overly been done in Goosebumps up to this point. But we did notice that in Horrorland. Remember how you were like slowly getting to know the characters?
Yeah, you weren't thrown into the story and this is the character in the description.
Yeah, and so far from what we've read, this is the first example of him doing that.
Yeah, yeah. The twins are saying that Mary Ellen doesn't like Jillian, and it's more so them creating a character for her.
Yeah, it's kind of like she's an imaginary friend.
Yeah, and Jillian tells them the feeling's mutual because being an 11-year-old, you don't want to be bringing your younger siblings everywhere you go. But instead of her having to bring one, she definitely has to bring two because they're twins. And they have a doll, so she has to bring 2 twin 6-year-olds plus the doll that's the size of them everywhere.
They make her treat as if she's a real person.
Right.
Because she's their imaginary friend.
And she's tired of it. And
so she takes a lot of her frustrations with the 2 girls out on the doll. Mm-hmm. And it starts when she calls the doll ugly. And of course there's a retaliation for that.
As there would be.
So in the middle of the night, the twins sneak into her room and try to cut her hair. Mm-hmm. Which is like a weird thing, but also not so weird that you couldn't see 2 younger siblings maybe trying a trick like that. Right. Especially if they were like, you know, really wanting to be mischievous.
We also get a description of Mary Ellen as well.
Yeah, and she isn't exactly much of a looker of a doll.
No, she's got frizzy brown hair, which is made of yarn. She's got a red heart-shaped mouth that's twisted into a grin that's kind of sinister. Violet glass eyes. And blood red circles painted on her round cheeks, and she's nearly as tall as the twins.
So, when I picture her as one of these 3-foot dolls, I don't picture her from the same 90s era of Barbie dolls. I picture her as one of those large dolls that my mom would have had as a kid.
Like way, like
Like
farther back.
those, yeah, like those really big ones. That didn't really move and were clunky, and like the arms and legs just sort of moved if you moved them, so you could like move a stiff arm up and down.
Kind of like a stiff Raggedy Ann almost.
Yeah, except like not fabric, like
Yeah, like the.
but they
thicker
still
plastic.
had the yarn hair that would be matted and often gross because it's old now, right?
Yeah.
And so like yarn instead of acrylic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like the glass eyes that often had the lids that would like independently move.
Yeah, especially when you like tilted them back to line down.
Yeah. So I'm picturing like one of those old baby dolls, like
Yeah.
like one of those big ones.
Which is weird for the kids to have in the 90s, but that's
I
the
mean,
idea that they're
I
creating.
had one kind of similar, because not quite like a big 3-footer like they're describing she is, but I definitely had a large one that was like almost the height of my torso that Mom used to have as a kid.
Okay.
That had blonde hair and like had similar eyes, and so it was definitely still like around, but in our day and age it would have been more so relics that like your parents would have had.
Yeah, something you'd find in the attic or something that they brought with them or something. So the next day, Jillian's friend Harrison is coming over. And they're going to go to the little theater to see a show, a comedy show, with a ventriloquist dummy.
And Katie and Amanda want to go.
Yes.
And here's the problem. Jillian doesn't exactly feel like bringing them because they just tried to cut her hair.
Yeah. That's the first reason.
Yeah, and the other reason is they want to bring Mary Ellen.
Yeah.
You promised us before this we could go, and if we can't bring her, we're not going.
And kids with their promises, like, that's all they have to go on. They can't drive anywhere, they can't get their own food, they don't have their own money, they can only rely on the promises of those around them. So it means a lot to them that Jillian promised to take them.
Yes.
Even though Jillian's not exactly thrilled about it.
So now Jillian and Harrison have to walk two twins and their giant doll to the theater.
Fantastic.
Just what they wanted.
The purpose of them going to see the show is that Jillian is doing a birthday party as an entertainer coming up.
Yeah, which is something that we've seen
Before.
We saw it in the second book, except it's not her alone doing it. And in fact, we saw it in the first book too. They were competing at birthday parties.
Yeah.
There's this weird thing about kids entertaining at other kids' birthday parties, which is not a thing I remember being a thing when I was a kid.
But,
happens a lot here.
Weird. But Jillian doesn't want to be a ventriloquist. She wants to be a clown.
Yeah, but they're going to because it's meant to be a comedy show. So the idea is they'll get ideas for jokes and things to do.
And just kind of change the jokes so it works with their act. But at least they have an idea of what they could do.
Yeah, and sort of see how a comedy show would be put off.
Yeah.
Which is actually pretty clever.
It is.
As they're getting ready to go and bring the twins with them, of course, to carry it there, Amanda grabs the doll and swings her over her shoulder, and the arm goes out and slaps Jillian across the face. And that has to be mentioned because so far we're doing an exact parallel setup of everything Slappy does.
Yeah.
Except in this case, it's super believable that that happened by accident. Now, Amanda claims Mary Ellen did it on purpose because they didn't get to cut her hair and she's mad about being called ugly.
Yeah.
But it's definite cause and effect because you take something big like that that has those stiff joints where the arms only move up and down one way and you're flinging it around, it's gonna fling out
gonna hit
and
something.
hit something. Like it's a very plausible, it happened by mistake kind of thing. But of course, it's made to make you feel like she's using this on purpose to sort of make a point to her older sister.
It's the first thing that Jillian thinks is done on purpose. By the doll.
Well, not by the doll, but by her sister.
Yeah.
And she
Using
gets and she gets kind of mad at it and like pushes the doll out of her way.
So while they're at the theater, Katie demands that Mary Ellen has her own bag of popcorn and shove the doll in Jillian's face, demanding. And this is kind of a show of innocence, I think, because 6-year-olds don't understand that things cost money. So if Jillian's going to the theater. Yes, her parents probably paid for the tickets and whatever, but there she has to use the money that her parents probably gave her for popcorn for the 4 people
Or
and
her
not the
own allowance.
Yeah, for the 4 people, Jillian, Harrison, and the twins, and not really accounting for a 5th bag of popcorn for the doll.
Yeah.
Right? Like, she could probably ask for a bag to split one of the popcorns, but would the twins go for that, not understanding the concept behind that this will cost money and the doll's not going to eat it, and it's just going to go to waste.
Yeah, and they're like, Mary Ellen needs her own bag. And especially after being accidentally slapped earlier, she gets visibly upset and actually shoves the doll. Because the doll's been pushed right in her face.
Yeah.
So she actually pushes the doll over.
Which is annoying. Like, having something just constantly shoved in your face.
Yes, it is.
The act that they're watching is called Jimmy O. James and his good friend Slappy. Dun,
And
dun,
his
dun.
good friend Slappy.
I don't think good and Slappy should be in the same sentence.
So this is the first time we've seen any mention of Slappy.
It is, yes.
But this is also the first time we've had any real mention of what the day is like. And it's beautiful and sunny, apparently. It's a great day. Perfect for a show.
I wish it was sunny here.
And Slappy's gotten an upgrade.
Yeah.
We have no idea what happened to him before.
No.
It's never said later how he was found or how he ended up in this act. But he's definitely gotten an upgrade.
Right.
So he's got the same gray slacks and black shoes that he had before from the dress suit. But now instead of like seeing the painted on button-up shirt, he has an actual button-up shirt. He has, instead of the gray suit jacket, he's got a red and white checkered sports coat.
Yep.
And now he has a red bow tie too.
Snazzy.
So Slappy's got a whole outfit redo.
Yeah. And the act started with Jimmy telling jokes, then Slappy took over with his jokes, which is a direct parallel from all the other staged performances that involve Slappy.
Yes, he gets a mind of his own and goes way off script.
He
And
does.
Jimmy seems very nervous about it.
Mhm.
Now, this is also a common comedy act, right, with ventriloquist dummies, where the dummy supposedly makes fun of the person performing and people in the audience.
I
And
think it's funny.
yeah, then they think they're going off script. They treat it like a real person.
Mm-hmm.
So this seems like it could plausibly be part of the act, but we know that Slappy actually does go off script and he's alive.
Yeah. So at this point, they ask for an audience volunteer, and the twins run up. They don't put their hand up. They just like run up on
bolt
stage.
there, yeah. And Slappy mentions he doesn't want to see that ugly doll.
Yeah. So that's referring to Mary Ellen.
Yeah. He also makes fun of the girls pretty hard, and they start to cry.
He is so mean to them. They're so mean that after the show, they go backstage looking for an apology from Jimmy because the girls were so insulted.
Yeah, and they like actually run backstage the minute the show is over. So Jillian and Harrison have no idea where the girls are. They see them start to run backstage, and they're having to go through the crowd and try to find them.
Which is a pretty bold move for 2 6-year-olds. Like, usually they want to stay with the people that they're familiar with.
Sometimes when kids get interested in things, they take off.
Yes, that's true too.
You can't always...
Yeah, but I'm just thinking when I was reading that.
They're probably bolder together.
Yeah, there's 2 of them. So at least they have their sister, and they're thinking, okay, well, I can go somewhere.
Yeah, and they're thinking, we're going to go get this apology we want. And they were very gung-ho about it.
Buddy system,
So,
right?
yeah.
So Jillian and Harrison split up to search for the girls, and Jillian finds the dressing room where Jimmy seems to be having an argument with the puppet, Slappy.
Yes. She can hear them fighting, and the cliffhanger is, oh no, she's been spotted spying at the door.
But also, Jimmy gets a bloody nose.
Yeah, and he answers the door with a bloody nose.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh no, it was me and I was clumsy. And so the whole next chapter is him explaining it was just him and he was working on an act and he wasn't really fighting with the dummy.
Sure.
Slappy definitely socked him in the face.
Oh, for sure. Slappy. Slappy is like that, though. Like,
Yes.
in all the books that we've read, he is not a nice dummy.
And that's his signature move.
It
he
is.
slaps people.
He does. Jillian finds the girls at the water fountain, giving Mary Ellen a drink. Like, why does a doll need a drink?
Yeah, and they got distracted from what they were going to do, which is why Jillian found him before she found the twins, because she figured they would have been in his dressing room already.
Right, so they just got distracted at the water fountain. So Jillian's just happy that they're found, and they take them for ice cream.
Right, but here's the thing. She just leaves Harrison.
Okay.
She doesn't go looking for him. She doesn't tell him she's found the girls. So as far as we know, he's still looking for them.
So you caught up on that too.
Oh yeah. She's just like, well, now that I have you, let's go home. And then to pry them away from the theater and like convince them they should go home, she promises to take them for ice cream.
But what about Harrison? Like,
yeah,
you completely ditched your friend.
So
there's no call. There's no like, let's find Harrison.
Well, there's no cell phones as far as we know.
nothing.
So she hasn't called him to say or texted, or there's no mention of anything. There's just, he's still looking for them, and she's like, oh, thank God I found you. I thought we were going to be in trouble. I need you to come home. She plies them home with ice cream, takes them out for ice cream, buys an ice cream for Mary Ellen, takes their time at an ice cream parlor before walking them the rest of the way home.
Yeah.
And has never said anything to Harrison first and last, has no idea where he is, if he's with any other people he knows. Like, no idea.
At home, they see Slappy on the couch.
Yeah, just sitting there. And it's like, what the heck?
So it turns out Harrison had found him in the trash can behind the theater
Yeah.
while Jillian and Katie and Amanda were gone for ice cream, and decided to bring him home.
Yeah, so while they were doing that, he had gotten caught up talking to friends.
Yeah.
And figured with how long it had taken him, she had probably found the twins by now.
Yeah.
Saw that Slappy was in a trash can as he was leaving, and beat them to the house with Slappy, and was waiting for them.
Weird. Like that scenario from like the time when the girls are found to like Harrison being at their house, like there's something missing there.
Yeah, but also I would definitely want to play a trick and make them think this dummy had showed up ahead of time. Like sitting on the sofa and freak them out. If I had been left behind by my friend.
And especially since they didn't bring you an ice cream.
Right?
So Jillian goes to investigate and gets bit.
Yeah, which is rather predictable.
Oh yeah.
Because that's another one of Slappy's signature moves after the slap. So we know he slapped Jimmy.
Mm-hmm.
His next signature move is to bite someone or otherwise grip their hand really hard.
Yeah.
So this is that moment.
Mm-hmm. Jillian looks for Jimmy's address on the dummy and is determined to take him back. She's not happy. She doesn't want him.
Yeah, she figures, no, we're done with this. She doesn't think it's a good idea to have him around. But Harrison is trying to convince her to do a ventriloquist act instead of
Clowns.
Yeah, and he figures that he can take Slappy, they can use him, and he can get another dummy somewhere, maybe from an uncle, you know, have it
Anything but this
for
one.
the show. And well, no, with that one.
Oh, okay.
And she's like, I don't know, she doesn't really want to use it, and she's like, are we even allowed to use it? Like, just because it was in the trash, like, maybe that was a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Jimmy still wants his dummy.
So while looking for the address, Jillian finds a little yellow piece of paper, and she begins to read the words on the paper.
But she says, it's nonsense, and sticks it back in the pocket.
Right, so she only reads the first 3 words.
Yeah, she doesn't really read it.
Harrison leaves Slappy for Jillian's dad to fix, because apparently he got damaged a little bit being tossed in the trash.
That's fine. We do mention that her father's a bit of a carpenter, and he's like working on a new coffee table downstairs and all this kind of stuff.
So he can do it.
So he could probably fix him up. She's like, fine, reluctantly. She's like, leave him here, but we're still gonna look for Jimmy's address and make sure it's okay. That's when she gets the call for supper from her mom.
Yes. And during that supper, Jillian loses her temper. She's had a rough day, this kid. She shoves Mary Ellen's face into the dinner plate.
Yes, because the girls are still continuing on their antics about Mary Ellen. Mm-hmm. And despite the fact that Jillian had been worried about the girls and where they were, they keep talking like, oh, well, Mary Ellen was so insulted with this ventriloquist, and we didn't like this ventriloquist because he made fun of us. And they kept talking about it so much and making such a big fuss about, oh, well, Mom, you have to get a plate of food for Mary Ellen, too. And this is like the third time that day that Jillian has had to listen to getting food
For this doll
that it can't eat. And she's fed up and she's like, Mom, like, do you have to give in to them and give them this? Because she's done it for her twice already today.
Yeah.
And she's done, like, giving in to them, trying to feed this doll. And her mom says, oh, it doesn't hurt anyone.
Just let them do what they want to do. So she gets in trouble for the yelling at Mary Ellen and slapping her head down on the plate of food. And she plots to tie the twins' laces in knots to get back at them because she doesn't feel she's at fault.
She should have been in trouble for that. Now, at one point, you really feel for Jillian because you can see why she'd be very annoyed.
Absolutely.
But on the other hand, the dinner incident was a compounding of frustrations, and it wasn't really a warranted action the way the shoves had been kind of warranted before. Like, there was nothing in particular done to her to provoke it. It's just a buildup of everything that day.
She's done.
Yeah.
She's done.
And you can see how she overreacted.
Yeah.
But you also feel a little bit bad for it going that far.
Yeah. Like, looking at it as an adult perspective, you'd say, just ignore it. It doesn't matter to you. It doesn't affect you. Just let the kids have fun. Let them do what they want to do. But as an 11-year-old, seeing this happen all day long and seeing...
And having the doll shoved in your face earlier in the day.
And everybody is, like, allowing this to happen and pretending with the kids. And you're like, the doll's not real. So, like, that's very frustrating as a child. Like, you can't look past it as well as if you were an adult. This is when the twins start playing with Slappy as well.
Jillian has convinced herself that this tying the shoelaces thing together is a good idea, even though she's also acknowledged that this is a terrible, lame plan, but it's the only thing she can think of, so she's gonna do it.
Which is, looking at it, is just like, how is she going to get down to tie this laces together without being seen?
Yeah. But, so she does her best to creep and be really quiet. And as she's going down, she hears this soft thud noise and some scraping.
Typical Slappy noises.
Yeah, and, you know, floorboards creaking, all that stuff.
Yep.
And that's when she finds Slappy sitting up in the chair in the hall. And he yells at her to go back to sleep in a hoarse voice.
Alright, so she thinks that the kids are playing with Slappy now.
Yeah, and that's it. That's your cliffhanger.
Yeah.
And she's a little bit frightened at first, but then the girls come out right away from behind the chair and say, oh, Mary Ellen made us do it.
Oh my god. Mary Ellen again.
Once again.
Right? Katie and Amanda want to tell Jillian something next.
Yeah, and they're like, listen, we really need to tell you something, but Jillian is done. She doesn't want to hear anything from him. She's like, I've had enough of you playing tricks on me and doing things to me in the middle of the night and talking about Mary Ellen.
So she refused to even talk to the kids. She's just so mad.
And here's where they do the really blatant foreshadowing, and they have the character say in her head, if only I had listened to them then.
Dun dun dun. After school, Jillian and Harrison go to a magic shop, which is another common feature in these Slappy books.
Yes, an old second-hand magic type store or a magic shop. We've seen it all happen before.
Which, based on how common they are in these novels, I've never seen a magic shop.
I know. In fact, there was an old toy store / magic shop that the Monster Boy came from too, and it's like, I've never been in one of those ever in my life.
No.
And I don't know if it's just a factor of living here that we've never had that particular type of secondhand store.
Yeah.
But like, if you guys have seen that kind of old secondhand like toy shop magic place, like, let us know if that's like a thing you grew up with or have fond memories of, or because that would be really interesting to hear about.
Yeah, like both of us have traveled to other countries, and going through those travels, I guess we were just in the more touristy areas and not the more
like rural places and stuff.
Yeah, or like,
it's not something I've ever seen or experienced.
No.
Like secondhand places with like video games and board games, sure. We've got that here even, but not like a toy store magic shop kind of thing.
No. Bonus points if you have a link to the shop's website or
If
a
it
map.
still exists or has a website.
Yeah, we like going down rabbit holes. So at the shop, Jillian runs into Jimmy.
Yeah, of all people.
Right?
Also, there's this comedy bit that keeps happening with her and Harrison. It happened at the theater too when they were trying to go through the hall to search for the kids, and it's happening again here. They both try to walk through the door at the same time, and Harrison is described as being built like a football player, so he's very broad-shouldered, and they get stuck in the door together, and I don't know why this is a running gag thing, but this is a running gag thing
This is
that
kind
we've
of their
decided
thing.
to do.
So Jillian talks to Jimmy, and Jimmy really doesn't want Slappy back.
No, and in fact, he warns her that she should probably get rid of him too, before it's too late.
Yeah. So Jimmy kind of lucked out with Harrison finding Slappy in the trash because he got rid of him. He got rid of him relatively easy based on previous stories.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny too because right after that, when she sees Harrison, she's like, "Oh, I was just talking to Jimmy, and Jimmy's gone." Like, he just got straight out of Dodge as fast as he could because it's like, I don't want them to give it back to me.
So Jillian and Harrison pick out some magic tricks for their show.
Harrison is reluctantly going along with this. He still hasn't convinced her to do ventriloquism.
No.
She's very stuck on this clown act, so he commits to it with her.
He's being a good friend.
Yeah.
They both get home. She sees Slappy leaned into the lizard cage. And this is when my heart jumped out
Because
of my
I was
body.
already expecting something bad to happen to the lizard.
Yes.
I already thought it was going to happen because why else would you randomly mention the lizard? And
Unless you're setting up for something later on.
right.
Yeah.
Which is why I was surprised nothing happened with the piano in the third book.
Yeah.
Anyway, the lizard is missing.
And everyone blamed the twins.
And the parents are taking it super seriously because they're like, guys, like, this is an animal. You can't just let it out and let it go. What if something happens to it?
Right? They're trying to teach responsibility and accountability and crossing lines. And it's a good learning moment if it was as it seemed. The twins claim they weren't involved. So everybody's seeing this as the twins lying.
And everybody's searching, and the twins won't look because they say they weren't involved in it. And the parents get upset and are like, listen, you need to admit to it and apologize for it and help us look for the lizard. Because, like, otherwise, you know, you're going to be in serious, serious trouble.
And then Petey is found in Slappy's mouth.
Yeah, and the way it's done is a good setup. Because you see Slappy start to move as if he's going to talk. And everybody kind of looks at the dummy, and Jillian's like, did he just move? And but it was really, you know, cliffhanger ending. But next chapter it starts, and it was really just the lizard crawling out of his mouth. So he had gone down inside Slappy, presumably to stay warm near the cage.
Probably.
Hide somewhere dark.
Yeah.
Which is much better than lost in the walls somewhere.
Oh my god, can you imagine? And the twins are punished because it's believed that they set up Slappy. They put Petey, the lizard, in Slappy. And their punishment was that they had to put Mary Ellen in the closet.
Because they keep insisting it wasn't them, and they even say it must have been her. And the parents are instantly having none of it.
No, why would she do that to her lizard? Knowing what the lizard needs, being the caretaker of the lizard, why would she take it out of his habitat?
And it obviously wasn't Mary Ellen.
No.
Like, the parents don't believe that the doll could have done it.
No.
So they're like, no. And because you spend so much time with this doll, and now you're even blaming something you've done on this doll, it's going in the closet, it's being put away, and you're not taking it out. Now this is another common thing we've seen.
Yeah. Put the doll in the closet. So
That always works, by the way.
Always. No. And then the book goes next to the party where Jillian and Harrison are acting as clowns.
Yeah, and it's a very abrupt change in the book because so far we've been going like day to day.
Yeah.
And
this is a jump.
Yeah, this is a huge jump in time where it's like a week later and it's the weekend and they're going to the party. And of course, there's a little bit of a weather change. The weather is okay, but it's like kind of cloudy.
Which is foreshadowing of how their act is going.
Yes.
They are bombing hard.
Like, real bad. None of the jokes are really landing.
No.
The kids think they're kind of lame. Just when the kids start getting into it, the jokes are broken and not working.
So the squirt flower is broken or there's no water in the squirt flower.
Yeah.
And the pie joke, which should have had Jillian or Harrison getting a cream pie in their face, actually put the cream pie in the kid's face, and it was shaving cream and not whipped cream, which bothered their eyes and their skin and caused them to cry. They bombed so hard that they didn't get paid.
No, the parent was furious.
Absolutely.
Because they got shaving cream in the kid's face, and they explained that wasn't supposed to happen, and the trick didn't go right, but the parent said, clearly you were unprepared for this, and like, you did a terrible job, and we're just like, you have to go home. You have to leave our house.
And this is where the weather changes again, where it gets dark and it starts to rain.
Yeah, so the skies go dark, there's rain, so now there's two clowns walking home in the rain, and I can just picture it, makeup running down their faces.
Stephen King would have a field day. So that kind of sets the mood and the atmosphere for the upcoming issues.
Yeah, because like, it's gonna rain for the rest of this weekend. And they're also gonna be somewhat grounded, or at least Jillian is, on account of how the party went.
So Harrison starts again with trying to convince Jillian to change to ventriloquism. Even suggesting that they get Jimmy's address and they go visit him to see if he has another dummy that he's willing to sell, so they can do a 2-person act.
Yeah, and of course Jillian in the meantime is very, very, very upset. She thinks the twins did that, and that they did it on purpose.
Oh yeah, because that would be right up their alley, and they'd be blaming Mary Ellen because Mary Ellen doesn't like her. They go visit Jimmy, Harrison, and Jillian, and he lives in the bad neighborhood.
Yeah, and again, this is another like new atmospheric change. So like, they really describe this house and how it's all overgrown and there's weeds everywhere, and it's like not well kept up.
Dark,
and it doesn't
lots of
look
bugs.
like anybody's been there for a while.
There's a bare kitchen and there's dummy parts all over the living room. And then they see a human head on the table.
Yeah, and this is actually described really well.
It
because
is so well
they're
done.
like, they're looking for Jimmy, they can't really find him. It's weird, the door's open, like, it was easy to get in, and all of a sudden they just see this head sitting on a table, and they recognize it as Jimmy's head. And they stop and talk about how, like, there's dark eyes with a blank stare just looking out at them, and it's like kind of a terrifying moment.
It is. Yeah.
And that's how they end the chapter.
Of course.
But this one actually was a really good cliffhanger. And they only discover it's a dummy's head, a very realistic dummy's head of Jimmy.
Yeah, it's like he's trying to create a mini-me for his act.
Yes. And as I said, there's scattered dummy parts around. The more they look in this place, they see like old dummy stuff instead of like
Complete
food
ones.
in the cupboards. Like, it's dummy parts and different things everywhere.
And while they're searching around and seeing all this, they find Jimmy's notebook and decide to read it.
Well, Harrison decides to read it anyway.
Yeah, truth. Harrison is saying it's unbelievable. The puppet maker of Slappy, as it turns out,
Was a sorcerer.
right, we get a lot of background information here.
Yeah, and this is the only time we're ever given a backstory.
Right.
So apparently this puppet maker is an evil sorcerer who liked to use toys to either steal Cosmo's fortune or make illness fall upon their owners.
Yes, they were his fun.
And he stole a coffin for the wood, carved Slappy, and put his own evil spirit in the dummy.
Right, and its sole purpose was to cause misery.
Yeah, and apparently the words mean the sorcerer's evil lives inside Slappy, which is page 82, if you're following along. So this was what gives me my first big question. If the words mean specifically the sorcerer's evil lives inside Slappy, why does it work on wood?
Right.
Now, you can claim it's because in the later reprints it says he was carved from the same coffin with a Slappy, so effectively a twin and therefore the same powers applied. Okay, fine, but why does it work on all the dummies in the attic?
Right.
In the third book, when they come to life and, like, are not evil and attack Slappy.
But they also say that Slappy is the worst, so the translation doesn't really fit. But if the translation was something like the most evil is Slappy or something like that.
But it's the sorcerer's evil lives
Yeah.
inside Slappy, and we're meant to believe the sorcerer himself, it's his spirit in Slappy. But it also says that he made evil dolls and sent them out to cause misfortune to their owners, and so it wouldn't be just Slappy.
No.
But also those words were made specifically for just Slappy. So why do they work on other dolls? Why are not all the dolls that come to life evil? Because not all of them were.
That's a whole.
This is a weird thing that I don't like. I feel like it's too much background. It's more background than we need.
Yeah, it creates a hole. Like if it was not there, there wouldn't be any questions, but having it there brings up more questions.
Yeah, and I understand wanting to like flesh out the background of a character, especially if it's one you really enjoy. And we know Slappy is R.L. Stein's favorite character. So it makes sense that as an author you'd want to flesh that out and do something with it and give them a backstory.
Yeah.
But at that point I just like start over. Because leaving it at mysterious words that can bring any ventriloquist doll to life was way better than like trying to nail it down like this.
Yeah.
It gets too specific.
It does, yes. So they look out because Jimmy's on tour, but have the idea of using Mary Ellen and Slappy. So that's their team that they're running with.
Yes, and the neighbor also tells them that Jimmy left rather abruptly.
Yeah, like he didn't leave any...
Like he left town pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is weird.
I wonder why he did that once he'd gotten rid of Slappy.
Boggles my mind. So the story between Slappy and Mary Ellen is that they're boyfriend and girlfriend, and they are going to get married.
Yes, and there's a whole comedy routine about them not wanting to get married to each other and all this that they have worked out. But she changes her mind, and she doesn't want to use Slappy.
No.
Now, in the meantime, while they're working out a routine, she had meant to be babysitting that day and had kind of forgotten about it. So she gets in a bit of trouble with her parents. And when she gets home, after having left the twins alone for a little while they're at Jimmy's house, written in lipstick on her mirror with Slappy sitting there next to it holding the lipstick is, "Where is my bride?"
So this makes you think that Slappy is listening and somewhat alive, and that he's looking for Mary Ellen.
Yeah, and it's also the first time that we've ever seen Slappy ask for a bride. He's always looking for his slave. Be my slave.
That's all he wants. So the bride is new.
This leads to her having a very violent outburst about Slappy. And it ends in a complete tantrum with like the twins running around and there's like spaghetti and milk and salad everywhere. Like the lunch that was, or well, supper that was supposed to be prepared for the kids that she's supposed to get ready, they just throw that around everywhere in a like complete fit.
And they all get grounded.
Yeah, because they all made a mess.
Yeah.
Jillian runs upstairs after being grounded only to find
Another message.
Yeah. Slappy has written on her bedroom wall, this time with lipstick.
Where is my bride?
So this is all very familiar Slappy sneaking into rooms, putting things on walls. That's a callback to the second book.
Oh, for sure. Also, being grounded, you think that means, you know, you're not allowed leaving the house, you're not allowed leaving your room, you're not allowed doing any extracurricular, da-da-da-da-da. But Jillian tells Harrison that even though she is grounded, she is able to do the birthday party that's coming up.
Yes, her parents are
How?
still going to let her do the party.
How did she get a second birthday?
I think because they're friends of the family.
Okay.
Because the way I understood this is they're basically next door.
Okay.
Like, or like 2 houses down, something like that. And as far as I know, they're friends of the family because all of the parents, including her parents, are going over to their house while the kids go to her place.
Gotcha.
At the same time, this makes no sense because the kids are there because the basement got flooded in the other house. So they couldn't have the party in the basement. I guess the idea was party in the basement while the adults are upstairs having their own get together. Heaven forbid you change the venue of the party to somewhere else in your own house.
Right.
So instead, let's foist all the kids off on the neighbors.
Sure. And at this point, Harrison and Jillian are not in agreement about their act.
No, and Harrison has found a new dummy. He did eventually get one from his uncle. His name is Moxie.
Mm-hmm.
And Jillian feels... Oh, Maxie, sorry. And Jillian feels much better about doing the act with Maxie instead.
Yes.
And using him and Mary Ellen instead of Slappy.
Mm-hmm.
They nail down their routine, and they think it's actually quite good, and the kids are going to get it.
And they don't. The birthday boy is not impressed because when they go to take Maxie out of the case, Maxie's not there.
No, it's Slappy.
And they have to improvise.
So one case is Mary Ellen, like usual, and the other is Slappy. Now here's a couple of questions I have about Mary Ellen. How is she fitting in a doll-sized case? She's one of those giant 3-foot dolls. How is she fitting on Harrison's lap? She's one of those giant 3-foot dolls. They suddenly describe her as a much smaller doll that you can hold, and not one that you would have to like fling over your back as a 6-year-old child because it's almost the size of you. Like, they start describing her as if she's the same size as Slappy. And it's like, no, she's a big doll with rigid legs that don't, like, if you were to sit her down, her legs would do this because they're those stiff.
And even on the cover of the book, she is the same size as Slappy.
Yeah, and her hair is also very much Bride of Frankenstein-y on the cover. Can we address this? And it's not curly brown matted hair. It's black and white, and it's very Bride of Frankenstein.
Mm-hmm.
But the covers are often not like
her
the
eyes are
actual
purple
books.
though.
They are, and the painted on cheeks.
Yeah.
But how big is this doll? Anyway, like, this is what I want to know.
Right?
Because suddenly she's like very regular sized.
And how big are ventriloquist dummies anyway? Like, if you look at some of them, they sit, although they're like a...
Well, they do have a
taller.
good height to them.
Yeah.
But they're sitting.
Yeah.
Because the legs are just fabric that dangle.
Yeah.
So the hand goes up under in the back.
Yeah.
And controls the head and sometimes the arms. Sometimes there's like sticks that go in the other hand for the arms.
But would there be a big size difference? Like, I don't know the average size of these things.
Well, I mean, it would be like probably a big from torso to head.
Yeah.
Because then the legs would make it almost 3 feet long, but the legs don't usually count because they're soft
And you
jelly
fold
fabric.
them up like this doll. Mary Ellen
and they
is
fold. Mary Ellen
plastic.
wouldn't fold. She's a giant plastic doll with
And if you did try to fold it, her legs would go out as you tried to fold it in half.
Right, same as when you sat her down, right? Because it was those hard, rigid legs that when you... I don't know if you've ever played with the dolls and you sat down a doll that was meant to be left standing, but
they
like,
just don't pivot as well.
No, and they had legs that just sort of went out like this when you tried to sit them down, and
that
they
was
go
for
out at
balance.
an angle, right?
And that was for balance because the head was, they were top heavy.
Yes, and especially if she's one of those like really bigger ones with the glass eyes and everything.
Yeah.
She's a giant doll that all of a sudden is being described as if she's also a dummy. Or at least a small Cabbage Patch doll, right? Where the bodies are soft and fabric and...
So getting back to the show, Slappy does really well with criticism, as we know. And he decided to cover the birthday boy in this thick green liquid that's kind of like pea soup.
Just like Mr. Wood did at the talent show. Just spews that everywhere.
Right? Like, that's his go-to. You insult my act, I will cover you in green stuff that smells really bad.
And of course, they describe it as being so much vomit that it actually makes the carpeted basement floor slick, and they're all like sliding around and trying to get away from the dummy who is now yelling and acting alive.
And taking the birthday boy hostage.
Yeah, he drags the birthday boy across the floor, and Jillian's like, wait, stop. Like, you seem to want someone to come with you. You're asking for a bride. If you leave him go... I will get you a bride.
Well, Harrison gives Slappy Mary Ellen, thinking it's Mary Ellen that Slappy wants.
Jillian and Harrison think they're going to pull a fast one this way.
Just swap.
Yeah. Swap the kid for Mary Ellen. And Slappy's like, why would I want that ugly thing? I want you. And again, this is weird because it's the first time Slappy's ever asked for a bride.
Right. And he's going for Jillian opposed to Mary Ellen, which is actually a doll. This is when Mary Ellen comes to the rescue?
Sort of. So, turns out, the great twist of this one, which I love because the setup is there.
Yes, absolutely.
And the foreshadowing was there. Mary Ellen was alive this entire time.
Mm-hmm.
So when the girls were given Mary Ellen from some sort of secondhand shop, she was alive. And she's been alive and terrorizing these girls and made them her slaves this whole time.
Mm-hmm.
So all the stuff, the cutting of the hair, everything was actually always Mary Ellen doing it.
Yeah, and she demanded the food. She was using the kids.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever anyone was mean to her, she remembered it. And she really did hate Jillian because Jillian was always mean to her.
Mm-hmm.
She would shove her. She put her face in the macaroni.
Yeah.
She was pissed. And when she saw Slappy and saw another dummy that she knew was alive, like she was the one who wanted a husband.
So she claims that she, Mary Ellen, didn't bring Slappy alive. She didn't read the words on that scrap of paper.
No, she did.
No, she's claiming that she didn't do that for Slappy to take Jillian as a bride.
Yes, she did that to take him as a husband for herself.
Right. She wanted him. So she's the one who stole the paper out of his pocket. She's the one who read it. And that's the reason why Jillian couldn't find the paper afterwards. Which they did talk about previously, but we didn't go into.
We kind of skipped over that, but it wasn't a big deal thing.
No.
It was while they were practicing with him for their act that
and
they noticed the paper was missing, and she decided to, like, lock him up and not use him.
Yeah.
And
it wasn't a lot
Slappy
of focus on it.
hadn't done anything up to that point.
No.
Slappy wasn't alive up to that point. Well, up until they started practicing with him for the show. All the stuff about, like, the lizard and the writing on the mirror and on the wall, that was all Mary Ellen placing Slappy around.
And wrecking the dining room. And everything was
all
Mary
of it
Ellen.
was Mary Ellen. So that was actually really fun and a really good setup.
Yeah, because the twins, the thing that the twins wanted to tell Jillian previously, and Jillian was too mad to hear, was the twins wanting to confess that Mary Ellen was talking to them, and she'd been doing so since day one. They were her
Yes.
slaves.
So now Slappy is upset.
Mm-hmm.
He can't believe that it's Mary Ellen that brought him to life.
Mm-hmm.
So now she's like, come with me and I'll be your bride. And he's like, why would I want some ugly old thing like you? Except the wording is much worse than that. And he hits her.
Mm-hmm. They fight.
Well, not quite yet.
Okay.
He hits her and knocks her down, and she's stunned. And then after she's hit and knocked down and starting to go unconscious from the smack, he's kicking her and everything.
Mm.
And, like, this is where we have our, like, chapter end. And it starts the next chapter where Mary Ellen is out cold.
Mm-hmm.
And Slappy is now going towards Jillian and chasing her. And because the kids are terrified and hiding, and Harrison doesn't know what to do, and Slappy has grabbed Jillian by the foot and stopped her from going up the stairs, Harrison sees this as his moment to run up the stairs himself. So he does and goes to try to get the other parents. And of course Jillian is left alone with Slappy, who is threatening to take her.
Yes.
And that's when Mary Ellen comes to.
And Mary Ellen and Slappy gets into a huge fight.
She grabs him by the foot first and pulls him down, and then they are fighting all over the living room. I should say the rec room, because they're in the basement. And they tumble their way out through to the workshop area and across the table, the coffee table her father's building, and onto the saw.
So Mary Ellen is getting cut in half, and as she's being cut in half, she grabs Slappy.
And won't let go of him. So even though he's pushing her through, he gets dragged through at the same time.
So this is a very morbid and descriptive scene for a children's book that I found so far.
Yeah, it was definitely kind of weird.
Because the two dolls have human characteristics, and this is kind of a very graphic way to go.
And it talks about her, like, the way they're pulled through the buzzsaw, and it talks about Jillian being transfixed at watching, like, the half of them fall off the buzzsaw, and, like, the way her dress flutters to the ground.
Yeah.
And, like they sort of linger on this moment of them being cut in half a bit.
Yeah.
And when she goes over and leans over to check and make sure that they're actually cut in half, because both pieces are on the floor now, Slappy makes one last grasp towards Jillian before his arm goes limp, and, like, it's done, that's it. There's no more anything. The dolls are gone.
So Harrison comes across the dummy's diary.
Yeah, so this is, like, later. So we're cutting to what I'm assuming is the next day?
Yeah,
or is
this
it
is
later that night?
I think this is a kind of like a jump as well. Like, the previous jump was just kind of like
the
cut and
timing
dry.
is, like, kind of weird here, because we know that the party was a disaster.
Oh, yeah.
We know that the kids are home and that the adults were brought back, but also that they had to clean up all that mess.
Oh, yeah. So much fun.
We also have a touching moment, actually, in the middle of the fight where the two girls confess that Mary Ellen was alive this whole time and they were sorry, and you sort of get, like, that make-up moment between the two younger sisters and the older sister, and it was kind of really nice to see. Of course, Harrison had kept Jimmy's diary, and he's still looking through it and reading it, and they're all sitting around watching TV in a now clean rec room. What did they have to go through to clean that carpet?
Oh, my God. And the green stuff is supposed to smell based on the other books.
Based on this one, too, it talked about the putrid smell and how other kids started vomiting.
I can't imagine.
Like
that
had to be a
hours
deep
and
shampoo
hours.
clean, right? Like,
Right? Repainting with that paint that has the stuff in it to take the smell out of the walls.
This had to be the next day.
Yeah. So Harrison reads in the diary that it is very likely that the evil spirit that is in Slappy will move to somebody else if he dies.
Yeah, so it can be passed to somebody close to the dummy. And that's when, even though her and the girls have made up and everything's good, she turns to the two girls and says, well, revenge is best served cold, and just spews green pea soup stuff at them. The end. That's your Goosebumps cliffhanger.
Yeah.
And I hated it. Overall, I did like the story. I liked how well it was crafted and done. I liked how it was refreshing to see Mary Ellen. What I didn't like was that cliffhanger, because it didn't make sense. Oftentimes, the cliffhanger ending doesn't make much sense. I guess it was better than some of the dream ones that they've put at the end of the books.
Are they assuming that, or is R.L. Stine assuming that when Slappy reached out for Jillian and grabbed her, that the evil spirit went
transferred? Yeah, and that's why he went slack after.
Yeah. Because
the evil spirit transferred to her, and now that she had the evil spirit in her, she was getting revenge on her sisters for treating her wrong. And I don't buy it. And I don't like it, and it's weird because he's been stopped before. Wood was crushed without an evil spirit going into
there
people.
was no mention of that previous.
No, and before, when we thought an evil spirit had escaped and he had tried this idea, it was that giant slug maggot thing going into the walls of the house. Remember that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that got ignored and he was evil again, so...
But in the original series, he stayed consistent with Slappy being made by a sorcerer, that he was made from coffin wood, and that he was evil. And you had to say the 3 or the 6 words to get him to come to life or put him to sleep. But the whole transferring of the evil is new to this book.
Yeah, and it's also new to this book that Slappy isn't just an evil spirit. It's that it's the evil spirit of that sorcerer specifically, which is weird.
Yeah.
And doesn't fit with it, and doesn't fit with the evil being transferred to the next nearest person either. Like, none of that lines up.
Overall, I wasn't a big fan of this one. Like, I think the story flowed generally really well, and I like the way that the twins were being annoying, and there's certain aspects I liked, but overall, I'm not a big fan.
Overall, I do come out on the side of positive for this one. Okay. I did like it. But I really hated that cliffhanger ending enough that it kind of spoiled the taste of the rest of the book for me, because the rest of the book was really good leading up to that point. There's also, we have to talk about this fight scene with her and Slappy, because it's very, very graphic.
It is. I was surprised to see it in an R.L. Stine book.
Yeah, so the problem is that, and it's fixed in the book, okay, so I will say I have read the classic reprint that they do with the new reissue series. In the classic reprint, they do, like, he did go back and change it so that he's not as mean to her when the fight first starts.
Okay.
Because he just sort of hits her and then turns on Jillian. He doesn't stay and, like, continue to call her names while kicking her. Like, that's the point that takes that from the usual Slappy is fighting with people, because we've seen Slappy fight before and we've seen him usually fight women.
Yeah.
And it's never entered the realm of violence against women. It's never made you think that or feel that way about it, but this one did. And that's because the context was different. He wasn't just looking for a generic slave, he was looking for a bride. He was rejecting this woman as saying she was too ugly and not good enough to be his bride, and just the way he was rejecting her and was so cruel and, like, beating on her and saying these mean things while repeatedly beating on her after she was down really threw it into the realm of abuse in a way that's, like, hard not to pick up on. Hi, future editing Mandy here. I thought in order to properly portray this, I should read out the actual passages so you can see how they're different. If you are reading the paperback of Bride of the Living Dummy, it's from pages 115 to 117, and this is the start of the fight. "No way," Slappy cried. "No way." He slid his arm back and swung his fist into her jaw. The wooden fist hit the doll head with a loud thump. Mary Ellen uttered a shocked groan and crumpled to the floor. "I will rule," Slappy declared, raising both hands high above his head in victory. "But not with an ugly rag doll like you." He stared down at Mary Ellen, sprawled on her back on the floor. His evil grin grew wider. "Why don't you learn to say goo-goo?" he snarled. "Maybe someone will think you're cute." He pulled his big shoe back and gave her a hard kick in the side. "Someone take the baby dolly out and burp her," he declared nastily. He pulled back his foot and kicked the doll again. Mary Ellen didn't move. Grinning in triumph, Slappy spun around and grabbed my wrist again. "Come with me," he ordered. "Let go of me, let go," I shrieked. "Never," he cried. "You are my bride now, Jillian. You will go wherever I tell you to go." The wooden hand clamped harder around my wrist. "Ow, you're hurting me," I wailed. "Let go, let go." He tossed back his head and uttered a scornful laugh. "You're hurting me," he cried in a high babyish voice, mocking me. Then, without warning, he swung his head against my forehead in a hard headbutt. "Oh," I groaned as the pain shot through my head, down my entire body. "What's your problem, Jillian?" the dummy demanded. "That was just a love tap." He tossed back his head in another high-pitched laugh. My head spinning, I struggled to force down the panic that froze me, struggled to pull free. But he squeezed my wrist until I screamed. "You'll never get away, my bride," he screamed. "Never." Then, to my surprise, he released me. His heavy wooden hand shot up in the air. He cried out in shock. I staggered back, rubbed my aching wrist. What happened? I lowered my gaze and saw that Mary Ellen had revived. She had grabbed Slappy's legs, pulled him away from me, and jerked him down to the floor. In the classic reprint version, and I'm not 100% sure what the page numbers are here because I am reading it with the ebook. It is a far shorter start with a lot less that happens. "No way," Slappy cried. "No way. I'm done with you. You're only a doll." Slappy reached out toward the doll's head. He made a gesture with his hand, like shutting off a light switch. "Night-night," he said. Mary Ellen uttered a shocked groan and crumpled to the floor.
I will rule, Slappy declared, raising both hands high above his head in victory, but not with a rag doll like you. Grinning in triumph, Slappy spun around and grabbed my wrist again. Come with me, he ordered. Let go of me, let go, I shrieked. Never, he cried. You are my bride now, Jillian. You will go wherever I tell you to go. The wooden hand clamped around my wrist. Ow, I wailed. Let go, let go. He tossed back his head and uttered a scornful laugh. Oh, I groaned. What's your problem, Jillian? The dummy demanded. He tossed back his head in another high-pitched laugh. My head spinning, I struggled to force down the panic that froze me, struggled to pull free. But he squeezed my wrist until I screamed. You'll never get away, my bride, he screamed. Never. Then, to my surprise, he released me. His heavy wooden hand shot up in the air. He cried out in shock. I staggered back, rubbed my aching wrist. What had happened? I lowered my gaze and saw that Mary Ellen had revived. She had grabbed Slappy's legs, pulled him away from me, and jerked him down to the floor.
And that's not necessarily a context a kid would notice, but it's also not necessarily something they wouldn't notice.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if there's, like, heaven forbid, reflections of it around them that they've seen it before. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely one of those things that was the context of it was different.
Yes.
And this is why context matters and the little things you do matter.
Yeah.
Because he does change the fight. And I reread the entire book, and literally the only thing he changes is what Slappy says to Mary Ellen at the beginning, and that he doesn't, like, stay and, like, continue to call her names and kick her.
And that's probably done because of the times of when the original book came out and the time that the re-release came out.
Right. And R.L. Stine has said that he hates going back and rewriting books, and he will not reread and rewrite a script if he can help it.
Mm-hmm.
Because for him, once the story is out and done, it's done, and that's it. And he's not concerned about if details line up or, you know, if the story matches with its own canon or anything like that. Like, he's just here to tell a fun story and have a good time.
So he probably got a lot of, or his publisher got a lot of flack.
I would say that it went mostly unnoticed when it was first published.
Mm-hmm.
And when it was time to re-release it as a classic, because again, Slappy is his favorite.
Yeah.
So he would want to re-release all the original Slappy
Yes.
stories as part of the classics reprint, especially since, as we found out, he was about to start Slappy World, which hadn't happened yet.
Yeah.
But it would make sense then to want to reprint all of these classic Slappy stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I think upon reflection, like you said, probably from an editor or someone at the publishing company, they probably picked up on it.
Yeah.
And said, hey, this doesn't quite jive.
Not in a children's book.
And so it got changed.
Yeah.
Because times change and things change when you reread them and look at them years later.
Yeah.
And just by omitting that small little part and otherwise keeping the rest of the story exactly the same, even the fight and even like them going through the saw and everything doesn't feel as bad.
Okay.
Just because that little thing is changed.
I'll have to take your word for it because I haven't read the re-release, and you said that you were going to because of the differences.
Yes.
And that might change my outlook on the whole book, because reading a children's book, I'm looking at it from like a children's perspective, not something that I would read in like a Stephen King or a James Patterson or anything like that. I just didn't expect to see that in a children's book.
Yeah. And you wouldn't.
No. And I think that kind of blindsided me, and it I'm not going to say ruined it, it lowered my rating of it.
Yeah, and I feel that. Me too.
We are also doing another Slappy book in this little detour from the original series.
And this time we're going to Horrorland.
Woohoo!
And so far we've liked Horrorland, so why not start with the first book in the Horrorland series?
Right. So this is Revenge of the Living Dummy, which is a poke at the horror movies.
Which, I mean, this was meant to be too with Bride of, but yeah. Revenge of is like another classic
Right.
thing.
So that's already like a winner for me. So I'm really looking forward to it. I have very high hopes. And with this book, you're going to notice that it is a shorter read, even though the book is the same amount of pages. It's a shorter read.
And that's because it has the second bonus Horrorland story at the end, right?
Right. And it's leading up to it. So it's a little bit more in this one than the rest of them I found. Just because, like you said, it's leading up to the Horrorland series.
It's the first book in the Horrorland series. So it's introducing the Horrorland theme park and all that stuff and like what's happening with these kids in the background.
Right.
As with the other Horrorland books, we're not going to read the Horrorland section
No,
for
we're not
this.
doing that right
We're
now.
just focusing on the
Goosebumps.
Goosebumps story. Do let us know what you thought of Bride of the Living Dummy.
Yes.
Let us know if you read the original Series 2001 or if you read the classic reprint, because this one was really easy to get a hold of because of the classic reprint. And also, there is a difference in the classic reprint, so you may have enjoyed it more not having read it the way we did.
Right. Feel free to express your opinions below. We love reading and hearing from everybody.
Yes, and as always, you can reach us on Twitter. Use our hashtag GBCGhostNextDoor if you want to tweet directly at us so that we can see your comments and so that we can also answer them later on video as well as in real time on Twitter.
Right. And your tag on Twitter is?
At a glitter macaroon with 1 T and 2 O's, and you are?
Coffee_with_Jen with 1 N.
And until next time, reader beware.
You're in for a scare.